While Donald Trump was posting on Truth Social declaring the United States was getting very close to meeting its objectives in the Middle East and considering winding down military operations, something happened in the Indian Ocean on Friday morning that nobody in Washington or London saw coming. Iran fired 2 intermediate-range ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia, a joint United States-United Kingdom military base so remote, so secret, and so strategically critical that American officials have called it an all but indispensable platform for global security operations. Neither missile hit the target. One malfunctioned in flight. One was shot down by an American warship. The base remains intact and fully operational. But that is absolutely not the story that matters. The story is that Iran fired those missiles at all because Diego Garcia sits 4,000 kilometers from Iran's coastline. And until Friday morning, Iran had maintained a self-imposed limit on its ballistic missile range of 2,000 kilometers. Iran just demonstrated capability to strike targets at nearly double the range it publicly acknowledged possessing. And if Iran can reach Diego Garcia at 4,000 kilometers, it can reach something else that nobody in Washington, London, Berlin, or Paris is discussing loudly enough. It can reach Europe. It can reach American carrier battle groups positioned 3,000 kilometers away because commanders believed that distance provided safety. It can reach NATO bases across the eastern Mediterranean and Central Europe that military planners assumed were beyond Iranian striking distance. By the time you finish watching this video, you'll understand why this missile launch represents the single most significant shift in Middle Eastern military balance since the war began, why European defense ministers are conducting emergency assessments of NATO-based vulnerabilities, and why the man who imposed Iran's 2,000-kilometer range limit being killed on day one of this conflict may prove to be the most catastrophic strategic miscalculation of the entire war. There is an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean that most people watching this have never heard of. It has no indigenous population anymore. It has no tourism industry. It has no civilian flights. You cannot book a trip there. You cannot find it easily on standard consumer maps. The people who were living there, roughly 2,000 islanders, were forcibly removed by the British government in the 1960s and 1970s so that the United States military could build a base so secret, so remote, and so strategically positioned that it has supported every major American military operation from Vietnam through Iraq to Afghanistan and beyond. It stores nuclear-capable B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, the most advanced strategic aircraft in the American arsenal. It holds enough fuel reserves and weapons stockpiles to sustain simultaneous combat operations across 3 continents. It sits at the geographic center of the Indian Ocean, roughly equidistant from the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa. From Diego Garcia, American bombers can reach Tehran, Baghdad, Kabul, and major targets across the entire region without requiring aerial refueling. American naval vessels can operate throughout the Indian Ocean with logistics support. Intelligence collection covers vast areas of strategic interest. The United States has described Diego Garcia explicitly as an all but indispensable platform for security operations in the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa. Home to approximately 2,500 mostly American military personnel, it has supported American military operations continuously for over 50 years. In 2008, the United States government acknowledged that Diego Garcia had been used for clandestine rendition flights of terrorism suspects during the War on Terror, though the full extent of those operations remains classified. The United States deployed several nuclear-capable B-2 Spirit bombers to Diego Garcia last year, specifically to support an intense airstrike campaign targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels who have been attacking commercial shipping. 2,500 American personnel, nuclear-capable strategic bombers, clandestine operations spanning 5 decades, logistics capacity to sustain major combat operations across multiple theaters simultaneously. This is not a support installation or a refueling stop. This is the crown jewel of American power projection in the Eastern Hemisphere, the facility that makes sustained American military operations in the Middle East, South Asia, and East Africa logistically possible. Diego Garcia is part of the Chagos Archipelago, a chain of more than 60 islands scattered across the Indian Ocean off the southern tip of India. The islands have been under British control since 1814, when they were ceded by France following the Napoleonic Wars. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Britain forcibly evicted as many as 2,000 people from Diego Garcia and surrounding islands so the United States military could construct the base. 2,000 people removed from their ancestral homes, their island erased from civilian maps, their culture and community destroyed, all so that the United States could establish a military facility so remote that no adversary could possibly reach it with conventional weapons. Until Friday morning. Iran launched ballistic missiles at the joint United States-United Kingdom military base in Diego Garcia on Friday, demonstrating a weapons capability that goes far beyond what Iran was previously known to have possessed. Those are Bloomberg's exact words. beyond what Iran was previously known to have possessed. Iran just showed the world a weapons capability that the United States intelligence community did not fully account for, did not accurately assess, and apparently did not expect Iran to demonstrate in combat conditions. And the implications of that revelation extend far beyond one remote island base in the Indian Ocean. The technical details of what happened Friday morning matter enormously because the specific missile system Iran employed tells you everything about what Iran was actually demonstrating to the world. The attack involved the launch of 2 ballistic missiles targeting Diego Garcia. Neither reached the intended target. One malfunctioned during flight, most likely during the power descent phase based on observed trajectory data. The other was intercepted and destroyed by missile defense systems aboard an American warship, almost certainly an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer equipped with Aegis Combat System and Standard Missile-3 interceptors. But the incident revealed an Iranian missile capability substantially greater than previously estimated by Western intelligence agencies. Diego Garcia lies approximately 4,000 kilometers from Iran's coastline. That's double, exactly double, the 2,000-kilometer range that Iran has consistently stated as the maximum range of its ballistic missile arsenal for nearly 8 years. Double. Iran's self-declared limit, imposed in 2017 by then Supreme Leader Ali Husseini Khamenei, was 2,000 kilometers. Diego Garcia sits 4,000 kilometers away. Iran attempted to strike a target at twice the range it publicly acknowledged its missiles could reach. According to Israel's military assessment released after the attack, Iran targeted Diego Garcia using a 2-stage intercontinental range ballistic missile, not a conventional medium-range system. Justin Bronk, a senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, one of Britain's most respected defense think tanks, stated that the attempt to hit Diego Garcia may have involved improvised use of Iran's Simorgh space launch rocket, which could offer substantially greater range when employed as a ballistic missile, though at significant cost to accuracy and payload capacity. The Simorgh is Iran's space launch vehicle. The rocket system Iran has been developing publicly and internationally as part of its civilian space program for satellite deployment. The same rocket technology that puts satellites into orbital trajectories can be reconfigured and pointed downward to deliver a warhead anywhere on the planet within that range envelope. Iran just demonstrated it can point its space launch infrastructure at the most secret American military base anywhere in the world. The distinction between civilian space program and intercontinental ballistic missile capability has collapsed entirely. Jeffrey Lewis, distinguished scholar of global security at Middlebury College and one of the world's leading experts on missile proliferation, told CNN that Iran was actively developing an intercontinental ballistic missile during the early 2000s that was subsequently reoriented towards space launch applications after then Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei imposed the 2,000-kilometer range limit in 2017. Khamenei imposed that 2,000-kilometer restriction in 2017 as explicit policy. He stated publicly that Iran would voluntarily limit its ballistic missile development to 2,000-kilometer maximum range, regardless of technical capabilities. Khamenei was killed on February 28th, the first day of this war, and within 22 days of his death, Iran fired a missile at a target 4,000 kilometers away. The range limit died with Khamenei. The self-imposed restriction that provided some measure of strategic reassurance to European capitals and American military planners evaporated the moment the man who imposed it was eliminated. And the new Supreme Leader, who Western analysts speculated before the war might prove more committed to Iran's ballistic missile and nuclear programs than his father, has now answered that question definitively through action rather than words. Now we reach the European dimension of this story, and this is the part causing quiet panic in NATO capitals right now, panic that deserves to be spoken about much more loudly and clearly than it currently is in public discourse. Iran claimed through its state media outlets that the attempted strike on Diego Garcia demonstrated Iranian capabilities for long-distance attacks, and they specifically noted that Diego Garcia sits at approximately the same distance from Iran as much of Central Europe. The same distance as much of Central Europe. Let that sink in for a moment. Iran just fired a missile 4,000 kilometers. Berlin, the capital of Germany and seat of NATO's largest European economy, sits 4,100 kilometers from Tehran. Paris, capital of France and home to one of NATO's 2 nuclear-armed European members, sits 4,300 kilometers from Iranian territory. Rome sits 3,100 kilometers away. Warsaw, increasingly important to NATO's eastern defense posture, sits 3,400 kilometers from Iran. Every major NATO capital in Central and Western Europe has just moved into demonstrated Iranian strike range. Trita Parsi, co-founder of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft and one of the most knowledgeable analysts of Iranian strategic thinking in the United States, told CNN that the attempted attack on Diego Garcia suggests that other military bases that the United States believed were safely outside Iranian missile range may actually be well within reach. He specifically mentioned American naval vessels that have been deliberately positioned 3,000 kilometers away from Iranian territory because American commanders calculated that distance provided safety from Iranian missile threats. Those calculations are now obsolete. Aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, logistics vessels, the entire American naval infrastructure supporting military operations in the region, from what was supposed to be a safe distance beyond Iranian reach, all of it is potentially vulnerable. And Parsi also noted explicitly that the demonstrated range definitely puts certain European military bases within Iranian striking distance, and he stated he did not know whether this revelation was going to cause a fundamental rethink of base vulnerability assessments on the European side, but he emphasized it definitely and dramatically increases the risk calculus for them. American warships deliberately positioned 3,000 kilometers from Iran because commanders believed that provided adequate standoff distance. Now those ships may not be safe at all. Aircraft carriers that were operating on the assumption they were beyond Iranian missile range. Supply vessels, logistics ships, the entire maritime infrastructure supporting combat operations from what planners thought was secure distance, all suddenly within demonstrated Iranian capability to target. And the European bases. The NATO air installations in Romania, where American aerial refueling tankers operate. RAF Fairford in England, from which American B-1 bombers launched strikes against Iranian targets. The British sovereign base areas in Cyprus. American facilities in Poland, NATO forward operating locations across Eastern Europe. All of them, every single one, now sits within the demonstrated operational range of an Iranian missile program that removed its self-imposed 2,000-kilometer restriction the moment the supreme leader who imposed that limit was killed. Trita Parsi made another observation that should be causing genuine alarm in Western defense ministries. He said the unsuccessful strike attempt on Diego Garcia raises profound question marks about whether Iran may also possess other types of weapon systems that Western intelligence agencies did not believe Iran had developed, that they might be employing other unknown weapons capabilities that have not yet been demonstrated or even detected. For 22 days, this war has been prosecuted on the foundational assumption that the intelligence picture of Iran's military capabilities was reasonably accurate, that Western analysts had solid understanding of what Iran could and could not do militarily. Friday morning destroyed that assumption completely. Iran has demonstrated possession of at least one weapon system, an intercontinental range ballistic missile derived from space launch technology that United States intelligence did not fully account for in threat assessments and operational planning. The question nobody in Washington, London, Paris, or Brussels can answer with confidence tonight is what else does Iran possess that Western intelligence agencies don't know about, haven't detected, haven't assessed accurately, and are going to discover only when Iran chooses to demonstrate those capabilities in combat. Now we turn to Britain, because the timing of the Diego Garcia attack created a genuine political crisis in London, unlike anything Prime Minister Keir Starmer has confronted since taking office. According to reporting from multiple British media outlets, the Iranian missile attack on Diego Garcia occurred before the British government publicly announced that the United States would be permitted to use British military bases for launching strikes on Iranian sites involved in attacks against commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Think about the sequence of events carefully. Iran fired missiles at Diego Garcia before knowing that Britain had just authorized American use of British facilities for Hormuz-related operations. Iran was already targeting Diego Garcia as a legitimate military objective in this conflict. Then Britain made Diego Garcia an even bigger target by officially placing it into active combat operations, by explicitly authorizing American forces to use the facility for strikes against Iranian assets. Iran's foreign minister responded immediately and directly. He stated that Keir Starmer is putting British lives in danger by allowing United Kingdom military bases to be used for aggression against Iran. The Prime Minister is facing substantial political pressure at home over his decision to extend American use of UK bases, which Iranian officials claim is putting British lives and British territory at risk. That statement from Iran's foreign minister constitutes a direct threat to the United Kingdom, not to America, not to Israel, to Britain specifically, a country that has carefully and deliberately tried to stay on the margins of this conflict, that refused initially to allow its Cyprus sovereign base areas to be used for offensive military operations, that has been extremely carefully calibrating its level of involvement to avoid becoming a direct target of Iranian retaliation. One of the missiles fired at Diego Garcia was intercepted and destroyed by an American warship. The other failed during flight, and Britain's official response was to condemn what it characterized as Iran's reckless attacks after the unsuccessful attempt to strike the base. Reckless. That is Britain's carefully chosen diplomatic language. A country that has absorbed Iranian drone attacks on its Cyprus facilities. That has watched its commercial shipping rerouted around the Strait of Hormuz at enormous cost. That has seen its liquefied natural gas supplies from Qatar, disrupted for 5 consecutive years of escalating tensions, is now officially characterizing Iran as reckless for firing missiles at the very base Britain just authorized America to use for military strikes against Iranian assets. And domestically in Britain, Starmer is confronting political pressure he apparently did not anticipate when he made the decision to open British bases to expanded American operations. According to British media reporting, Starmer spoke to the Cypriot president on Saturday morning specifically to reiterate that RAF Akrotiri, Britain's sovereign base area in Cyprus, will not be used by American forces to target Iranian missile sites. He also spoke separately to the Crown Prince of Bahrain to discuss the broader regional situation. Starmer is attempting to draw precise lines defining British involvement. Cyprus' sovereign base areas cannot be used for offensive strike operations against Iranian territory. Diego Garcia can be used for what Britain characterizes as defensive operations. RAF Fairford in England can be used for certain types of strikes. Starmer is trying to be partially in the war without being fully committed, to support American operations selectively without becoming a comprehensive combatant. And Iran is responding by treating every British military asset in the theater as a legitimate target, regardless of whether Starmer's government considers its use offensive or defensive in nature. Iran is not accepting Britain's self-defined limitations on its involvement. Iran is treating any British facility that supports American operations as valid military objective. Now we reach the most important context that connects the Diego Garcia attack to everything else happening in this war right now. The statements that reveal how dramatically American and Israeli strategies have diverged. According to media reporting, Israel stated that attacks against Iran will increase significantly in intensity and scope during the coming week. That announcement came mere hours after President Trump declared publicly that he was considering winding down American military operations in the Middle East, that the United States was getting very close to meeting its stated objectives. Trump says winding down, Israel says increasing significantly. These two statements were issued on the same day by supposed allies who claim to be prosecuting the same military campaign with shared objectives. The gap between American and Israeli strategic intentions has never been wider or more publicly visible. Trump's statement included an apparent rebuke of his transatlantic allies, despite simultaneously claiming the United States was getting very close to meeting its objectives and that the country is actively considering winding down military efforts in the Middle East. Getting very close to meeting its objectives. And Iran responded to that specific statement by firing intercontinental range ballistic missiles at the most secret, most protected, most strategically critical American military base anywhere on the planet. That is Iran's assessment of how close America actually is to meeting its objectives. Trump subsequently issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran in a post on Truth Social on Saturday, explicitly warning that the United States would strike Iranian power generation plants if the Strait of Hormuz is not reopened to commercial shipping within that time frame. 48 hours? Strike power plants if Hormuz is not reopened. That ultimatum expires Sunday evening, and as of this moment, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed to normal commercial traffic. Daily transit calls through the Strait of Hormuz have collapsed to nearly zero from highs above 120 vessel transits per day seen earlier this calendar year, according to maritime traffic data analyzed by Charles Schwab and other financial institutions. Zero transits, from 120 per day to effectively zero. The waterway that carries approximately 1/5 of the world's total oil production and a similar proportion of global liquefied natural gas shipments has essentially stopped functioning as a commercial maritime route for 22 consecutive days. And Iran, which just demonstrated missile capability to strike targets at twice the range it publicly acknowledged possessing, is being told it has 48 hours to reopen the strait or face destruction of its electrical power generation infrastructure. Iran's response to that ultimatum came through its foreign minister. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that Tehran is prepared to facilitate the passage of Japanese commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, adding that negotiations with Japan on the specific issue are ongoing and progressing. Japan can pass. America cannot. Iran is now selectively opening the Strait of Hormuz by nationality, by bilateral negotiation, by individual agreement with specific countries. Japan negotiated directly with Tehran. Japan gets its vessels through. America's allies and partners get nothing until they separately and individually negotiate with Iran directly, not through Washington as intermediary. This is Iran establishing a fundamentally new economic and diplomatic order in the world's single most important energy choke point. If you want your commercial shipping to pass through waters that run along Iran's coastline, waters that Iran considers within its sphere of control. You negotiate with Iran directly, bilaterally, nation to nation, not through American mediation, not through Washington's coordination, not accepting American terms. You deal with Tehran on Tehran's terms, or your ships don't pass. Now we reach what some analysts are calling the Dimona moment, because it happened on the same day as the Diego Garcia attack, and represents another story that nobody is adequately connecting to the larger strategic picture emerging. Iranian missile strikes in southern Israel marked the first time in this entire war that Israel's nuclear research center at Dimona was directly targeted by hostile fire. Israel's secretive nuclear reactor facility sits approximately 13 kilometers southeast of the city of Dimona in the Negev desert. Both the city and the nuclear facility lie near several major military installations, including Nevatim Air Base, one of Israel's largest and most strategically important Air Force installations. Israeli defense officials stated that interception attempts were executed prior to the missile strikes reaching their targets, and that the entire incident will be reviewed comprehensively. Initial footage from the impact scene in and around Dimona showed a civilian bus with its windows completely blown out by overpressure. Heavy structural damage to several residential and commercial buildings. Dozens of firefighters and police personnel responding to 2 separate impact sites. Israel's emergency rescue services reported 4 people were seriously injured, including a 4-year-old girl, and 29 additional people sustained light injuries. Dimona, Israel's nuclear reactor, the facility at the absolute heart of Israel's nuclear weapons program, a program Israel has never officially acknowledged exists, has never confirmed or denied, maintains strategic ambiguity about. Iran targeted it on the same day it fired intercontinental range ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia, 4,000 kilometers away. On the same day, Trump issued his 48-hour ultimatum about bombing Iranian power plants if Hormuz doesn't reopen. 2 nuclear-adjacent targets, one in the Indian Ocean, one in the Negev desert, struck or attempted on the same day. Iran is no longer confining this war to conventional military dimensions. Iran is sending unmistakable messages about what it now considers legitimate targets for retaliation, and a country's nuclear research infrastructure, the facilities that produce fissile material, the installations that develop nuclear weapons capabilities, those are now explicitly on that target list. Let me synthesize all of this and explain exactly where the strategic situation stands right now. Iran fired 2 ballistic missiles at Diego Garcia, distance 4,000 kilometers, twice Iran's publicly stated range limit that held for nearly 8 years. 1 missile was intercepted and destroyed by an American warship. 1 malfunctioned during flight. Neither struck the target. The base remains fully operational, but the capability has been conclusively demonstrated. The range limitation that Khamenei imposed in 2017 died with him on February 28th. His successor has now shown the world what Iran can actually reach when political constraints are removed and technical capabilities are fully employed. And what Iran can actually reach includes all of Central Europe. American naval battle groups deliberately positioned 3,000 kilometers from Iranian territory because commanders calculated that provided safety. NATO military bases scattered across the eastern Mediterranean and eastern Europe. Every American carrier strike group operating in the region, every major European capital, every forward deployed NATO installation, all of it now sits within demonstrated Iranian strike range. According to multiple defense analysts speaking on background, Russia and China are most likely providing the satellite imagery and targeting intelligence that made the Diego Garcia strike attempt technically possible. Iran does not possess sufficient satellite coverage of the Indian Ocean region to generate its own precision targeting data for that geographic area independently. Russia and China together possess comprehensive satellite reconnaissance coverage. They are providing targeting coordinates, trajectory data, potentially even battle damage assessment imagery for Iranian missile strikes on the most secret American military facility anywhere in the world. Think about what that means strategically. 3 countries, 3 major powers. A war that began as a United States-Israel military operation against Iranian assets has transformed into a conflict where Russia is feeding real-time intelligence support, China is potentially providing missile components and technical expertise, and Iran is firing ballistic missiles at targets that Western military planners assumed were beyond anyone's reach except strategic nuclear powers. Trump says publicly the United States is winding down operations. Israel announces attacks will increase significantly. The 48-hour ultimatum expires Sunday evening. The Strait of Hormuz remains at 0 commercial transits. Iran just struck a target it was not supposed to be capable of reaching. A 4-year-old girl is seriously injured in Dimona. Israel's nuclear facility has been targeted for the first time, and somewhere in the Indian Ocean, an American destroyer is positioned at the exact coordinates where it shot down a ballistic missile aimed at Diego Garcia. There has been speculation among weapons analysts for years that Iran could potentially be capable of missile strikes beyond the claimed 2,000-kilometer limit. They simply had not publicly shown their capabilities. The attack on Diego Garcia represents that moment of revelation. Iran showed its cards, and the hand Iran was holding is substantially larger, more capable, more threatening than anyone in Washington, London, or Tel Aviv planned for when the first bombs fell on February 28th. The man who imposed Iran's 2,000-kilometer range limit as explicit policy is dead. His successor just demonstrated Iran can strike at double that distance. The weapons capability that Western intelligence agencies did not fully account for has been revealed in combat conditions. European capitals are within range. American ships thought positioned safely are potentially vulnerable. NATO bases assumed to be beyond Iranian reach are now targetable, and the war that was supposed to eliminate Iranian military capabilities has instead revealed capabilities Western intelligence fundamentally underestimated. Trump's 48-hour ultimatum expires tonight. Tomorrow could represent the most consequential escalation point of this entire conflict, and Iran has just demonstrated it possesses weapon systems that can reach targets nobody thought Iran could strike.